Thanks, Hank. I really wish I could be with you there in person. On June 1st of last year, Governor Ron DeSantis appointed Justice John D. Couriel to the Florida Supreme Court to fill the vacancy left by Barbara Lagoa when President Trump appointed Barbara Lagoa to the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Like me, Justice Couriel was born and raised in Miami. He attended Harvard College, where he graduated magna cum laude in 2000. After graduating from Harvard Law School in 2003, Justice Couriel clerked for the Honorable John D. Bates of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia before joining Davis, Polk, and Wardwell in New York. In 2009, he became an assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of Florida, where he prosecuted hundreds of federal offenses, including international money laundering, public integrity, healthcare fraud, and human trafficking cases. Justice Couriel spent several years as a partner at Cobrian and Kim, where he traveled the world doing complex litigation regarding financial products and services, asset recovery, and government enforcement defenses, mainly focusing on Latin America. Justice Couriel is married to Dr. Rebecca Tunkel, and they have 2 children. They met as competitors on their high school speech and debate team. That really is a great story. That was a brief but very impressive sketch of your legal career, which frankly is very impressive. And hopefully tonight we'll learn a little bit more about you. Good evening, Justice Couriel. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us this evening.
It's my pleasure, Fred. Good to see you.
So let me start by asking you what inspired you to pursue a career in law in the first place?
You know, to be honest, I think it was sort of preordained in a way, in a very good way. I had the good fortune to be born into a family that at least a generation before had been involved in the law. My paternal grandfather had been a lawyer and judge in Cuba, and it felt very much like coming home to follow the same career path here in the United States.
You mentioned your grandfather's role in your deciding to become a lawyer. Were your grandparents influential in other ways as well?
Yeah, you know, I think I had the good fortune of knowing all of my grandparents, actually, and I think that is a tremendous blessing. I think the older I get, the more I appreciate the courage that they had when they were younger than me, actually, and the amount of self-sacrifice that it took for them to leave Cuba, and in the case of my father's side of the family, send my father alone. My father arrived in 1960 as an unaccompanied minor through Operation Pedro Pan, and as the father now of a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old, that seems incomprehensible to me, but in fact, it was absolutely the right call.
Were the circumstances surrounding coming to the United States the same for your mother's side of the family?
My mother's side of the family, they had the good fortune of coming together as sort of a family unit. And they were just very, very brave. They, you know, without any hint of, you know, pretense or we're too good for this, or, you know, they had gone to college in the United States. You know, my maternal grandfather was working at the Bank of Boston Savannah branch, and just like that, the only place for him to work is a 7-Eleven in Miami. And he wasn't too proud for it. He wasn't, you know, it wasn't beneath him. It was what he needed to do to put his family through school.
As you mentioned, your family members are a real strong influence in your life. Who else do you credit with guiding you to the point where you are today?
I'm grateful that I had fantastic teachers all through my life. I had, you know, I had a Catholic education as an elementary school student at St. Timothy's, and then at Christopher Columbus High School. I'm deeply indebted to the Marist brothers of the schools, who were just wonderful in terms of just, you know, getting me ready to take on the things I was going to take on in life. The tradition of Marist education is a great tradition. It's one of, you know, giving everybody the tools they need to succeed. And I had the good fortune of that continuing on in my undergraduate and graduate education and in the profession. I've had wonderful teachers, whether it's, you know, the folks I studied with, my peers as well as my professors, and then my teachers in the law. My judge, John Bates, who's a model public servant, and my first sort of taste of judicial decision making. At Davis Polk, I'm really indebted to people like Andre Skill, who was like my parents, a Cuban American immigrant. He'd come through Pedro Pan as well, but had been relocated to New York, of all places, went to Princeton, and was a successful corporate lawyer at the very highest level, when that was a tough thing to do. Guy Struve, Scott Muller, Martine Beeman, those are all great Davis Polk influences on me. And then finally, when I sort of moved to Cobriel and Kim, I have tremendous respect for my partners there who started a very unconventional and successful law firm.
We're changing topics a bit. What aspect of the law do you find the most intriguing or the most frustrating?
I think it's the same aspect of law is both the most intriguing and the most frustrating, and that is how ultimately, what matters to me both as a jurist and as a lawyer is, the public meaning of the law, what the law means. And that is simultaneously a straightforward exercise and a very vexing exercise. Ultimately, it's the sort of mandate that we all as jurists have to determine not what the legislature intended, because we're not governed in a free society by what any legislator or legislature intends, but what they meant. That is, what are the words of the bargain that they struck and that the executive signed actually mean? And that sounds really straightforward, and sometimes it really is very straightforward, and it serves as a bit of an anchor whenever you're sort of grappling around with concepts like what do we do here? Well, what did it mean? So that is both a very liberating idea, because I think once you accept that that's what the law is about, you realize that we live in a democracy and have only ourselves to hold accountable for what our legislators do, and it's a very humbling frame to put around the judicial role as well.
The theme of this evening's event is professionalism and leadership. Looking back at your time in private practice and as a U.S. attorney, do any excellent leadership examples stand out?
Yeah, I have an embarrassment of riches on that side, for sure. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami, where I was privileged to serve, is populated by some of just the greatest public servants you could imagine. Alex Acosta was the U.S. Attorney who hired me. I admire him greatly. Matt Menschel, who was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and Andy Laurie, who was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, wound up becoming my law partners. So I've seen them both as professional role models and as role models of principled public service.
What advice can you give young lawyers on how to take on a leadership role as they move forward in their careers?
So I think there's a really good analogy in medicine. Medical students, my wife is a doctor, but also a medical school teacher, a professor at a medical school. They learn a lesson, see one, do one, teach one, about just about every procedure that they do, and that's pretty good for the law as well. First watch, right? See one, watch and pick the right mentors to watch, then do it. Actually get in there and take that deposition, argue that motion, seek an opportunity to do it, and then immediately teach, immediately pass on what you've learned. I think that's the way to sort of gain and distribute knowledge without stepping on toes.
In this age of social media, where what you post on Facebook or Instagram follows you indefinitely, what advice can you offer young lawyers, or frankly, any lawyer, on managing their social media presence in a manner that will not affect them adversely in the future?
I think it's so important to just remember that you're an officer of the court, no matter what you do. Being a lawyer is not like being in other businesses. And it follows you, it should follow you, and I think whether you want it to follow you or not, it does follow you everywhere you go, and that includes online. So I think it requires members of the bar to be extremely judicious about what they say and do publicly and how they hold themselves out, remembering that they represent the cause of justice in our society. And we're all going to slip up, we're all going to make mistakes, and we're all going to regret something that we've seen or done online, for sure. But I think an awareness of the risk is really important for young lawyers.
Thank you very much, Justice Couriel, for joining us this evening. I'm sure that our entire Supreme Event audience is glad to get to know you a little better. I certainly know that I am.
Thank you very much, Fred.